What if the very thing you are doing to make people like you, is the exact reason they don't respect you? What if your smile, the one you put on a little too quickly, is costing you more than you know? What if the most magnetic people in every room you have ever walked into, stopped caring about the room a long time ago? Stay with me. Because what I am about to tell you is going to feel uncomfortable at first. And that discomfort, that slight resistance you feel right now, is exactly the feeling that precedes every important truth. Introduction. There is a man at every party. You know the one. He laughs a little too loudly at jokes that aren't that funny. He agrees with opinions he clearly doesn't hold. He shifts, almost imperceptibly, but perceptibly enough, depending on who he is talking to. Around the confident crowd, he becomes bold. Around the intellectual crowd, he becomes cerebral. Around the funny crowd, he becomes the comedian. He is everything to everyone. And somehow, despite all of this effort, despite all of this careful, exhausting shape-shifting, nobody finds him particularly interesting. They like him, sure. The way you like elevator music. It's fine. It's pleasant. It doesn't offend anyone. But nobody leans in when he speaks. Nobody remembers what he said after the party ends. Nobody thinks about him on the drive home. He is likable. And completely forgettable. Now contrast that with someone else entirely. She walks into the same room. She doesn't announce herself. She isn't performing. She holds her drink, she listens more than she speaks, and when she does speak, the three people nearest to her stop their own conversations to hear what she is saying. She doesn't agree with everything. She doesn't laugh at everything. She doesn't shift her personality to match the energy of whoever she happens to be standing next to. She is simply, completely, and unapologetically herself. And the room, without fully understanding why, is drawn to her like a compass needle to north. What is the difference between these two people? That is exactly what we are unpacking today. The charisma myth. Most people believe charisma is something you are born with. That it is a gift, distributed at birth to the fortunate few and withheld from everyone else. That the magnetic, compelling, unforgettable people of the world simply arrived that way. Blessed with good looks, natural confidence, effortless charm. This is one of the most damaging myths in the entire landscape of human development. Because it lets people off the hook. If charisma is a birthright, then the absence of it is not your fault. You simply weren't chosen. You weren't given the gift. And there is nothing you can do. But here is the truth that the most quietly confident, most genuinely magnetic people in the world understand, and that nobody talks about loudly enough. Charisma is not a gift. It is a residue. It is what remains when a person has done the deep, uncomfortable, countercultural work of becoming genuinely comfortable with who they are, regardless of whether anyone approves. It is the byproduct of authenticity. And authenticity, real, unperformed, unnegotiated authenticity, is destroyed by two habits. Two specific, common, almost universally practiced habits that most people don't even recognize as habits. Because they feel so natural. So socially appropriate. So virtuous, even. Until you understand what they are actually costing you. Let's talk about the first one. Habit 1, the approval addiction. The first habit that secretly kills your charisma is this. Making other people's opinions of you more important than your own. Now before you say, I don't do that, I want you to sit with the following questions for just a moment. Have you ever changed what you were about to say because you weren't sure how it would land? Have you ever posted something, or not posted something, based on how you imagined it would be received? Have you ever walked away from a conversation replaying it in your mind, analyzing every word you said, wondering if you came across wrong, said too much, were too much? Have you ever agreed with something you didn't actually agree with, not because you changed your mind, but because disagreeing felt too risky? If you answered yes to any of those, and most honest people will, then you are living, to some degree, inside the approval addiction. And it is quietly suffocating your charisma. Here is why. There was a researcher, a social psychologist named Solomon Asch, who conducted one of the most revealing experiments in the history of human behavior. He put people in a room with a group of actors and asked them simple questions about the lengths of lines drawn on a card. Questions with obvious, clear, objectively correct answers. But the actors, one by one, gave the wrong answer. And here is what happened. A significant portion of the real participants, intelligent, normal, perfectly capable adults, also gave the wrong answer. Even though they could see with their own eyes that it was wrong. Even though nothing was at stake. Even though they would never meet these people again. They gave the wrong answer because the social pressure of the group was more powerful than the evidence of their own perception. That experiment is not just a footnote in a psychology textbook. That experiment is happening in your life. Every day. In 100 small ways that you barely notice. Every time you laugh at something that isn't funny because the group laughed. Every time you soften your opinion because you sense the room doesn't share it. Every time you make yourself smaller so someone else doesn't feel threatened by your full size. You are giving the wrong answer. And the terrible irony, the devastating, almost poetic irony, is that the very thing you are doing to be liked is the thing that makes you least worth knowing. Because nobody is drawn to a mirror. We are drawn to windows. To people who show us something we haven't seen before. Something real, something distinct, something that could only exist in that particular person and no one else. A mirror just shows us ourselves. And we can see ourselves at home. Short story, The Painter Who Lost His Style. There was once a painter named Henri. Henri had a style that was unmistakably his own. Bold brushstrokes. Unusual color combinations. A way of capturing light that made people stop and look longer than they intended to. His early work was not universally loved. Critics found it too unconventional. Gallery owners said it was difficult to sell. Audiences stood in front of it with furrowed brows. But the people who loved it, loved it. With a ferocity that surprised even Henri. Then came the success. And with the success came the opinions. Your next collection should be softer. More accessible. More commercial. More like what people are buying right now. And Henri, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be understood, wanting to finally stop defending his choices at dinner parties, listened. He softened his brushstrokes. He chose safer colors. He painted what the market wanted. And his work sold. More than it ever had. But something strange happened. The people who had loved his early work, the ones who had connected to it with that fierce, personal, inexplicable loyalty, disappeared. And the people buying his new work didn't love it. They just purchased it. The way you purchase a piece of furniture. Useful. Appropriate. Entirely replaceable. And Henri, standing in a gallery full of his own sold paintings, felt more invisible than he ever had when his work was hanging unsold on unfashionable walls. He had traded his window for a mirror. And in doing so, he had lost the only thing that ever made him worth finding. The neuroscience of approval seeking. Here is something that will help you understand why breaking this habit is harder than it sounds. Your brain, the extraordinary, ancient, survival-oriented organ you carry in your skull, does not distinguish between physical danger and social rejection. To your nervous system, the possibility of being disliked triggers the same threat response as the possibility of being physically harmed. Your cortisol rises. Your amygdala fires. Your body prepares to fight, flee, or freeze. This is not weakness. This is evolution. For hundreds of thousands of years, social rejection was genuinely life-threatening. Being cast out of the tribe meant facing predators alone, foraging without help, surviving without community. The brain that learned to monitor social approval obsessively, that learned to scan every interaction for signs of acceptance or rejection, that brain survived. And you inherited it. So when I tell you to stop seeking approval, I am not telling you to do something easy. I am telling you to do something that requires you to consciously override a deeply wired survival mechanism. But here is the critical distinction your ancient brain cannot make, and that you must make for it. Social disapproval in the modern world will not kill you. Someone disagreeing with your opinion will not end your life. Someone finding your humor too dry will not end your life. Someone thinking you're too direct, too quiet, too unconventional, too much, or not enough, will not end your life. It will feel threatening. Your body will register it as danger. But it is not danger. And every time you override that false alarm, every time you say what you actually think, hold the position you actually hold, express the person you actually are, despite the discomfort, you are rewiring that circuit. You are teaching your nervous system a new truth. I can be myself. And I will survive. More than survive. You will become magnetic. The quiet power of self-approval. There is a moment, and people who have done this work will recognize it immediately, when you stop waiting for the room to tell you whether you are enough. It doesn't happen all at once. It isn't a single dramatic revelation. It happens in small moments. The first time you share an unpopular opinion and don't immediately apologize for it. The first time you decline an invitation without manufacturing an excuse. The first time you sit in silence in a social situation instead of filling it anxiously with words, and realize that the silence was actually fine. These small moments accumulate. And slowly, the way the bamboo grows its roots underground before it shoots 90 feet into the sky, something begins to change in how you carry yourself. Your shoulders drop slightly. Your sentences stop trailing off into questions. Your eye contact becomes steadier. Your laughter becomes real instead of performative. And people, without being able to articulate exactly why, begin to feel something different in your presence. They feel that you are not waiting for their approval. And that, paradoxically, counterintuitively, almost unfairly, makes them want to give it to you. This is the quiet power of self-approval. Not arrogance. Not indifference. Not the performative confidence of someone who is trying very hard to look like they don't care. But the genuine, settled, unannounced ease of someone who has already decided who they are, and is simply living inside that decision. That is the foundation of real charisma. And it is built by dismantling the first habit, the approval addiction, one honest moment at a time. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that nobody talks about. Not the exhaustion of hard work. Not the exhaustion of long hours or physical strain. Those kinds of tired, you understand them. You can name them. You can sleep them off. No. I am talking about the exhaustion of performance. The bone-deep, soul-level fatigue that comes from spending your days managing impressions. Monitoring reactions. Adjusting, softening, reshaping, editing yourself in real time, based on the invisible social feedback of every room you walk into. If you felt something reading that, if something in your chest recognized that particular kind of tired, then what I am about to share with you is not just interesting information. It is a way out. Because in the first part and NBSP, we dismantled the first habit, the approval addiction. The deeply wired, socially rewarded pattern of outsourcing your sense of self to other people's opinions. Now we go deeper. Now we talk about the second habit. The one that is harder to see. The one that wears a disguise so convincing that most people never recognize it for what it is. Until it has already cost them everything that makes them magnetic. Habit 2, over-availability. The second habit that secretly kills your charisma is this. Being too available. Too agreeable. Too easy to have. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Isn't availability a good thing? Isn't being agreeable just being kind? Isn't making things easy for people a sign of generosity? And the answer is, yes. In the right measure. At the right time. With the right people. But what most people who struggle with charisma are doing is not measured availability. It is not thoughtful generosity. It is the anxious, compulsive, approval-driven habit of making themselves permanently, unconditionally, exhaustingly accessible, to everyone, at all times, about everything. And it is destroying their magnetism. Here is why. There is a principle in human psychology, and in economics, and in physics, and in nearly every system that governs how value is perceived, called scarcity. What is rare is valued. What is abundant is taken for granted. This is not a cynical observation. It is simply how human perception works. Think about water. In most modern cities, water flows freely from every tap. You don't think about it. You don't treasure it. You turn it on and off without a second thought. But to someone crossing a desert, a single cup of water is precious beyond calculation. The water didn't change. The scarcity changed. And while I am absolutely not suggesting you treat human relationships like economic transactions, the principle of perceived value operates in every domain of human experience, including how people experience you. When you are endlessly available, when you respond to every message within seconds, agree with every suggestion, show up for every request, never push back, never have a prior commitment, never have a perspective that creates any friction, you become the tap. Useful. Functional. Completely taken for granted. But when you have a life that is genuinely full, when you have standards, when you have opinions that you hold even under social pressure, when you are sometimes unavailable because you are busy living with intention, you become the cup of water in the desert. Suddenly, your presence means something. Suddenly, the time you do give is received as a gift rather than assumed as a right. Suddenly, without doing anything artificially manipulative, without playing games or manufacturing distance, you become someone worth pursuing. Worth impressing. Worth remembering. Short story, The Doctor and the Mirror. Let me tell you about a man named Dr. James. Dr. James was one of the most genuinely kind people you could ever meet. Warm, attentive, always willing to help. If a colleague needed covering, James covered. If a friend needed advice at midnight, James answered. If someone in his social circle needed a favor, any favor, large or small, James was the first to volunteer. He was universally liked. And profoundly underestimated. People called James when they needed something. But they rarely called James just to talk. They rarely asked his opinion on things that mattered. They rarely considered how he was doing with the same energy he considered how they were doing. James was present in everyone's life. But somehow, mysteriously, painfully, he was central in no one's. One evening, a mentor sat with James over coffee and said something that changed his life. She said, "James, you have made yourself so easy to have that people have forgotten to appreciate having you. You are always there. And because you are always there, they have never had to imagine what it would feel like if you weren't." James sat with that for a long time. And then he began, slowly, uncomfortably, against every instinct he had, to practice something new. He started saying no to the requests that cost him but served no real purpose. He stopped responding to every message immediately. He began investing his energy selectively, deeply, genuinely, but selectively. And something remarkable happened. The people in his life, the ones who truly valued him, drew closer. They began to notice him in a new way. They began to ask his opinion not because he was available but because they had started to understand that his perspective was worth seeking out. And the people who had only ever called him when they needed something, they drifted. And James, for the first time in his adult life, felt the quiet, solid satisfaction of knowing that the people in his circle were there because they genuinely wanted to be. Not because he had made himself impossible to refuse. He had stopped being the tap. And he had become, finally, fully, the cup of water in the desert. The difference between warmth and weakness. I want to address something important here. Because I know that for some of you, particularly those who were raised to equate self-sacrifice with virtue, to see saying no as selfishness, to measure your worth by how much you give, what I am describing might feel uncomfortable. It might feel like I am asking you to become cold. I am not. There is a profound difference between warmth and weakness. And confusing the two is one of the most common and most costly mistakes that genuinely good people make. Warmth is the genuine, freely given expression of care for another person. It is present. It is real. It is one of the most beautiful qualities a human being can possess. Weakness, in this context, is the compulsive giving of yourself out of fear. Fear of being seen as unkind. Fear of conflict. Fear that if you say no, if you hold a boundary, if you take up space, you will be rejected, abandoned, or judged. Warmth gives because it wants to. Weakness gives because it is afraid not to. And here is the critical distinction that changes everything. People can feel the difference. They may not be able to articulate it. They may not consciously register it. But somewhere in the ancient, finely tuned social intelligence that every human being carries, they feel whether your giving comes from abundance or from anxiety. And giving that comes from anxiety does not inspire gratitude. It inspires, often unconsciously, a mild contempt. Because what we sense in the over-available person is not generosity. What we sense is need. The need to be needed. The need to be useful enough to be kept around. The need to earn, through endless accommodation, the approval that they have not yet learned to give themselves. And need, however well-dressed, however socially acceptable, is not magnetic. Genuine, settled, self-sourced generosity is magnetic. The difference is everything. The Stoic framework, virtue over validation. The Stoics had a word for the kind of person who lives in perpetual pursuit of external approval and validation. They called it living kata doxin, according to opinion. According to what others think. And they considered it one of the most spiritually impoverished ways a human being could exist. Not because other people's opinions don't matter at all. The Stoics were not antisocial. They believed deeply in community, in duty, in genuine service to others. But they made a razor-sharp distinction between serving others from a place of virtue, from genuine care, from principle, from the freely chosen expression of one's best self, and serving others from a place of need for their approval. Epictetus, who had every external reason to be broken, having spent years as a slave, wrote words that should stop every over-available, approval-seeking, charisma-suppressing person in their tracks. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. What he was describing, in the language of his time, is what modern psychology calls internal locus of control. The settled, grounded, unshakable understanding that your sense of worth, your sense of peace, your sense of identity, does not live in other people's hands. It lives in yours. And when you truly internalize that, when it moves from intellectual understanding into lived experience, something shifts in how you walk through the world. You stop performing. You stop managing. You stop the exhausting, charisma-killing work of trying to be what every room needs you to be. And you start, simply, powerfully, magnetically, being who you actually are. Short story, The Candle and the Bonfire. There were once two sources of light in a great hall. The first was a candle. Small, careful, positioned precisely where it would be most useful to the most people. It burned steadily, dutifully, flickering slightly whenever someone walked past, adjusting its flame to the movement of the room. Everyone appreciated the candle. It was reliable. It was helpful. It never made demands. But nobody gathered around it. The second was a bonfire. Lit in the courtyard just outside the hall. Nobody asked it to burn. Nobody positioned it for maximum social utility. It simply burned, fully, completely, without apology, because that is what it was built to do. And people, without being asked, without being organized, without even fully deciding to, drifted toward it. They stood around it. They talked around it. They warmed their hands and told stories and stayed longer than they planned. Not because the bonfire was trying to attract them. But because the bonfire was so completely and unapologetically itself, so fully committed to its own burning, that proximity to it felt like something rare and real. You have been trying to be the candle. Positioned. Careful. Useful. Adjustable. It is time to be the bonfire. Building quiet confidence, the practical path. So how do you actually do this? How do you move, practically, in real life, in the actual daily texture of your relationships and your work and your social world, from the approval-addicted, over-available pattern that has been killing your charisma, to the quiet confidence and magnetic presence that you are genuinely capable of? Let me give you 3 shifts. Not theories. Not abstract ideas. 3 concrete, actionable shifts that begin the moment this video ends. Shift 1, develop a point of view, and hold it. Magnetic people have perspectives. Not aggressive ones. Not combative ones. But genuine, considered, distinctly personal views on the world, and the quiet confidence to express them without immediately softening them into oblivion based on the reaction of the room. Starting today, begin noticing your actual opinions. Not the ones you perform. Not the ones that seem safest in the current social context. Your actual opinions. About the book you read. The decision being made at work. The direction a conversation is taking. The value of how someone is spending their time. You have these opinions. You have simply been editing them before they reach your mouth. Stop editing. Express them, calmly, without aggression, without the need for anyone to agree, and then let them land where they land. The people worth knowing will find you more interesting. The people who drift away were only ever comfortable with the edited version of you. And the edited version of you was never going to build real charisma anyway. Shift 2, reintroduce friction. Not conflict. Not rudeness. Not the performative contrarianism of someone who disagrees with everything just to seem interesting. Friction. The healthy, honest, natural friction that occurs when a real person with real opinions and real boundaries interacts with the world. Say no when no is the honest answer. Push back when something is genuinely worth pushing back on. Decline the invitation without a manufactured excuse. Sit in the silence instead of filling it. Let someone be wrong without immediately rushing to smooth it over. Friction is not the enemy of connection. It is the texture that makes connection real. A world with no friction is a world of glass, smooth, slippery, and impossible to get a grip on. Be someone people can get a grip on. Shift 3, invest deeply in the few, instead of shallowly in the many. Over-availability spreads you thin across a wide landscape of people, none of whom receive enough of you to truly know you. Quiet confidence, magnetic presence, is built through depth, not breadth. Choose the relationships worth your full investment. The people who show up for you as completely as you show up for them. The conversations that go somewhere real. The connections built on genuine mutual respect rather than social convenience. And pour yourself into those. Not at the expense of basic kindness to everyone else. But with the clear, settled understanding that your energy is finite and valuable, and that it deserves to be placed where it will grow something real. When you are fully present with the few, rather than partially present with the many, something in your energy changes. You stop feeling scattered. You stop feeling like you are constantly running on empty. And that settled, replenished, unhurried quality that emerges, that is what people feel when they are in your presence. That is magnetism. That is the quiet confidence nobody can quite put their finger on but everyone in the room can feel. The person on the other side. I want to close with a picture. Not of who you are right now, navigating the approval addiction, stretching yourself thin across too many people and too many performances. But of who you are on the other side of these 2 habits. The person who has done this work. They walk into rooms without scanning for approval. They speak without monitoring every word for social safety. They laugh when something is genuinely funny, and stay quiet when it isn't. They hold their opinions the way they hold their posture, not rigidly, but steadily. With a ease that comes not from never having been challenged, but from having been challenged and discovered that they are still standing. They are not the loudest person in the room. They are often not the funniest, or the most conventionally charming, or the most socially effortless. But they are the one people remember. They are the one people think about on the drive home. They are the one people describe to others with a slight difficulty. There's just something about them, because genuine magnetism resists easy description. It simply exists. Quietly. Powerfully. Undeniably. And it is built, brick by quiet brick, by every moment you choose truth over performance. By every no that was honest. By every opinion you held under pressure. By every morning you decided, before the world had a chance to tell you otherwise, that you were already enough. That person is not a fantasy. That person is you, on the other side of these two habits. And the distance between here and there is shorter than you think. It begins with one honest moment. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who has been shrinking themselves. Someone who has been running on the exhausting fuel of other people's opinions. Someone who is magnetic and doesn't know it yet because they've been too busy trying to be liked. And third, and this one is non-negotiable, subscribe to the Stoic path. Stop trying to be liked.